Hi, I'm Ashley Alvarado. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Southern California Public Radio. That's KPCC and LAist. So at its heart, I think community engagement is closing the gap between communities and the journalists who aim to serve them. I think the thing about community engagement is it's most successful when we take an agile approach and that we're willing to understand there's no one size fits all. So sometimes it's thinking about who is the target audience and how are we going to reach them. Sometimes it's thinking about whose voices have been missing from this conversation and how do we incorporate them. Other times it's just looking at the language we choose. So it's really hard to say that this is the way that works best. But I think so long as it's rooted in listening, you're off to a good start. So there aren't a ton of newsrooms that have engagement teams at this point, and many of those that do are focused more on social media engagement or the different kind of emerging platforms like Reddit or TikTok or Snapchat. But if you're looking to get into more of the platform optimized or not platform specific kinds of engagement, like what I do, there are opportunities to think about the titles change from place to place, and a lot of them don't necessarily have that as the primary responsibility. But you can be thinking about how do you manage source relationships? How are you getting out there and producing events? If you're looking for a job, if you're graduating and wanting to get involved, I would say go to letsgather.in to sign up for the Slack, and you can see some of those positions. Most often, you'll see something like engagement reporter or engagement producer, and those are titles that are appearing more and more. On my team, we're pretty unique in that we have one person dedicated to engagement admin. And so she's really making sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and staying in touch with community members. We have a sort of an all-purpose engagement producer, and she's really focused on making sure that all of our communication channels stay open and that we're going to audiences, we're going to community members to ask them what they think. We're making sure that we're being responsive to the questions that they ask. And then we have an engagement producer who's dedicated exclusively to early childhood. And so she's getting to focus quite a bit on strategy and how we really get to that idea of closing the gap. So when it comes to money and community engagement work, I think there are two different conversations. There's one that is that about like, what can you expect going in as somebody who wants to do this work? That's like journalism. You don't necessarily get into it for the money. But when and also a lot of these positions they're starting in, sort of lower, more entry level kinds of positions, and just understanding that this is something that will grow as the organization's understanding commitment to it grows. And that's the experience that I've had. When it comes to this being something that helps the bottom line for newsrooms, there are a lot of ways that we're starting to see that be the case. One is when we take the time to do stories that are rooted in engagement, and then we tag them as such in our content management system, we see these stories outperforming other kinds of stories in the metrics that matter most to us. So those are the stories that are really resonating with readers that visit us more than 3 times a month and live in our general geography. The other thing that we're seeing is that we're a nonprofit newsroom. So we are working quite a bit with foundations, and foundations are also able to recognize that through this kind of reporting, we're reaching audiences that need information more. And so they're more excited to contribute to the work. It's absolutely critical that journalists understand we don't start with a blank slate. So when we're going in and wanting to do community engagement, what we show up as, what we represent is more than just the individuals that we are, or the best intentions that we have. It's the relationship that individuals or whole communities have had with journalism, the structures of journalism, not just even the individual brands, over a long period of time. And so I think having that understanding as you start the conversation is pretty critical. I mean, you need to be able to go in and say, I know that the experience that you've had very likely has left a bad taste in your mouth or done much worse. And so if you're able to recognize that and have that self-awareness and then say, here's what I'm after, here's what I'm hoping that we can accomplish together. How can we co-author this? How can we co-design it? And how can I be completely transparent in what we're trying to accomplish? And then just listening. One of the things that we talked about yesterday was this idea of looping. So as you're doing an interview and somebody tells you something, can you go back and say, okay, I heard you say this. this is what I'm thinking that you're talking about. And that gives somebody the opportunity in the moment to say, oh, hey, no, that's not it. Or that's not how I see myself. One anecdote that I've shared quite a bit is about a woman who did an interview, and then her cousin called her and said, hey, did you know you're on the front page of the paper? Your photo is there and it says, you're the new face of poverty. And this woman just said, that's not how I see myself. That's not how I identify. I'm so much more than that. And that moment has stuck with me for now almost 10 years as I think about the work we do and how we can diminish who somebody is with our choice of headline even. So one of the things that's hampered, I think, public media, or at least public radio, is this like we're broadcast, right? And broadcast is just sort of the spreading of everything for everybody. But what then happens is you don't have those more personal connections. And so we've really found that we can do more original reporting if we center that reporting on the specific experiences, specific information needs and habits of a target audience. And the two projects that I've been part of with that, at least like getting it off the ground, is completely redesigning our early childhood coverage. So we use human-centered design to interview parents and caregivers of children 0 to 5 in Los Angeles County across really different sort of target characteristics. And then in doing that, we were able to say, okay, well, this person over here who has this very specific experience and this person over here who has this very specific experience, they have some shared habits. They have some shared information needs. And so if we're able to come up with that, we'll produce something that is more unique, but also still appeal to different groups. And with that, we've just been able to do some really cool projects, including this participatory photo project we're doing right now where parents are photographing their lives, and then they're going to be traveling with a photo exhibit and doing different panel conversations where we're centering the experiences of the parents instead of those experts that as newsrooms, often do. We just hear from over and over again. We're also doing that with our census coverage for 2020. We wanted to go out so I should back up and say, the census is a really big deal, just full stop. It's also a really big deal in Los Angeles where we have the county that's considered hardest to count in the country. And when we're talking about $800 billion of funds that are being distributed, redistricting, and the numbers that we as journalists use all the time, we need to get it right. But all of the things that make LA a wonderful place to live and all of the things that make LA a challenging place to live contribute to its being very hard to count. So we wanted to get a real understanding of what are the information needs of Angelenos, both those who listen to us regularly and those who have no idea who we are. And then to think about how can we start that conversation? How can we activate them to want to learn more? We did all this research. The first thing that happened that was both humbling and sort of this aha moment was that people who listen to us all the time, people who consume a lot of news, don't have a high understanding of the census, how it relates to their daily lives, what the stakes are. And so we wanted to change what we're already offering our core audiences. And then beyond that, we started to see there are opportunities for us to better serve the greater audience, and particularly when it comes to the census, those communities that are considered historically hard to count. And with that, I'm talking about undocumented immigrants, folks who don't speak English as a dominant language. And we were able to, we're now in the early stages of having a collaboration with community, ethnic, and language media, where we're saying, we don't need all these stories to land on our site. We're not trying to take your sources or take your audiences. We're just trying to raise the general understanding of the census in Los Angeles. And so we're going to leverage the resources and the expertise that we have, partner with you in the ways that feel right, and move forward with that. So I think that those are very long responses to your question, but it's just that when we move from trying to be something for everyone to everything for someone, we start to get to do more original reporting that potentially has a bigger effect than what we're doing otherwise.